The Baltic Sea lay silent beneath a gray December sky. A thin veil of mist drifted above the surface, blurring the horizon into a dull silver line. Out in the open water, the small Swedish freighter Antares moved steadily south, its engines humming softly under the steel deck. The smell of salt and diesel mixed in the cold air as faint ripples trailed behind the ship. It was the night of December 28, 1990. The four-man crew had been at sea for 2 days, transporting lumber toward Lysekil. For them, it was routine, one of many coastal runs through the narrow northern shipping corridors. The Antares wasn't large, only about 25 meters long, but it was dependable. Built in the mid-1970s for short-range cargo work, it had weathered years of Baltic winters without incident. Inside the wheelhouse, Captain Bo Carlson leaned over the radar screen. A faint green echo appeared at the edge of the display. Distant, steady. Another vessel, perhaps a tanker or a container ship, was crossing several kilometers ahead. He checked the bearing, adjusted slightly to starboard, and logged the time. The sea was calm. Visibility hovered around 3 nautical miles. Nothing suggested danger. Below deck, 2 sailors rested in their bunks. The warmth of the engine room vibrated faintly through the hull. Above them, the helmsman maintained course and watched the navigation lights blink through the haze. A low wind pressed against the bow, but otherwise the world outside felt motionless. Far to the west, a much larger vessel, a cargo carrier flying a foreign flag, was moving toward the same area. At over 150 meters in length, it dwarfed ships like the Antares. Its crew relied heavily on radar and automatic plotting systems as they navigated one of Europe's busiest maritime corridors. On paper, both vessels were on safe headings, but small errors at sea rarely stay small. The Baltic in winter can play tricks on perception. Mist scatters light, distances shrink, echoes fade on radar. The Antares, with its low profile and minimal metal surfaces, produced a weak signal that could easily be mistaken for a buoy or fishing craft. It was enough to hide a deadly approach behind an illusion of distance. Around 4:30 in the morning, the captain of the Antares noticed something strange. The other ship's lights appeared brighter, too bright for comfort. They should have been passing well clear to port, yet they seemed to be holding position. Closing, not crossing. He picked up the radio handset and called on the international channel. "Traffic eastbound, this is Antares south of Lesu. Confirm your course." Static filled the speaker. No response. He tried again, then once more, his voice sharper each time. Still nothing. Only the hum of the engine and the faint slap of waves against the bow. The larger vessel's officer on watch had seen the Antares on radar but misread its bearing. He believed the contact was stationary, an anchored object or a distant buoy. Confident in his interpretation, he kept his speed, unaware that the small freighter was directly in his path. On the Antares, the tension grew. The captain ordered a 5-degree turn to starboard, then 10. The helmsman responded, feeling the slow swing of the bow through the mist. But the glow of the oncoming ship only grew brighter, cutting through the fog like a pale wall of light. There was a moment of disbelief, the kind that freezes instinct. Then came the order every sailor dreads: hard starboard. The wheel spun, the engine surged, but the sea offered no time. Out of the darkness, the massive bow of the larger vessel broke through the mist. The collision was sudden and absolute. Metal screamed against metal as the freighter's port side was torn open just behind the wheelhouse. The impact threw the Antares sideways, sending equipment and men flying across the deck. Windows shattered. The sound of tearing steel echoed into the night. Below deck, the crew was caught in chaos. The engine room lights flickered once before dying completely. Water burst through the damaged hull with a sound like thunder. The ship listed violently to port as cold seawater surged through the cargo hold. Someone shouted an order, the words lost to the roar of the flood. Within seconds, the Antares began to sink. The captain tried to reach the emergency beacon, but the tilt of the deck made movement impossible. The ship rolled further, the floor becoming a wall. Loose cargo slammed against bulkheads. The men fought to climb, to reach the surface, but the water rose faster than thought. On the bridge of the larger ship, the crew felt a heavy vibration run through the hull. They rushed to the windows and saw through the fog a small vessel rolling under their bow. The lookout shouted, and engines were thrown to reverse, but the sea was already swallowing the Antares whole. In less than 3 minutes, the freighter disappeared. The water smoothed over as if nothing had been there. No fire, no explosion, only silence and the faint smell of oil drifting in the mist. Searchlights swept across the surface. Lifeboats were launched. The men called out into the dark, but there was no answer. The Baltic Sea had already claimed its due. By dawn, rescue helicopters circled the area, guided by the weak echo of an emergency signal that had never been sent. They found nothing but fragments of wood and a life ring marked with the ship's name. The Antares, with her 4-man crew, was gone. When daylight broke over the Kattegat, the sea was calm once more. The storm that had passed through earlier in the week had left behind a glassy stillness, the kind that hides everything beneath. Rescue vessels fanned across the area, their crews scanning the water for any trace of life. Helicopters from Gothenburg hovered low, their rotors chopping the mist into fragments. What they found told a quiet story, a slick of oil, scattered timber, and a lifebuoy drifting in circles. By noon, Swedish authorities confirmed that the freighter Antares had gone missing. Radio silence since the early morning, last known position logged a few miles north of Denmark. The larger ship involved in the collision, heavily damaged along its bow, had already reported the incident. Its captain spoke in disbelief. The smaller vessel had disappeared in seconds. Divers from the Swedish Navy were dispatched within hours. Using side-scan sonar, they searched the seabed along the probable track of the Antares' final transmission. By late afternoon, the image appeared on their monitor, the unmistakable outline of a small ship lying upright, intact but broken open along the port side. Depth, 25 meters. The coordinates matched perfectly. As the divers descended, the light faded to green. The water was still, visibility no more than a few meters. At the bottom, their torches revealed a haunting sight. The Antares resting silently on the sand, her deck lights gone dark, ropes still trailing into the silt. The hull was torn wide near the bridge, edges bent inward like paper crushed by force. The name was still visible across the bow, its blue paint dulled by sediment. Inside, everything was frozen in time. The wheelhouse was tilted, instruments covered in a fine layer of silt. A pen still lay on the chart table. A coffee mug had rolled into the corner. The clock above the helm had stopped at 4:37. The precise moment of impact. The divers found the crew where they had fallen, 2 in the engine room, 1 near the ladder to the deck, and the captain still near the bridge. None had reached the surface. The water had been near freezing, and the rapid flooding had left no time to escape. Recovery operations lasted 3 days. Each man was brought to the surface and taken to shore under the watch of local police and maritime officials. The news spread quickly through the harbors of Lysekil and Dalsbrook. Flags were lowered to half-mast, and families gathered by the piers, waiting in silence as the rescue vessels returned one by one. The Swedish Maritime Authority launched an immediate investigation. Both ships had been operating legally, navigation lights on, radar systems functioning, communication channels open. Yet somehow, one had not seen the other. The larger cargo vessel's officer on watch testified that he had observed a small radar contact but assumed it was stationary. He admitted to maintaining course without verifying visually. Forensic analysis of the Antares radar and compass confirmed that her readings were accurate and that she had attempted a turn moments before impact. Experts determined that human error, not equipment failure, had caused the disaster. In clear terms, the report described it as a failure to correctly interpret radar data combined with insufficient lookout. In maritime law, such phrases carry immense weight. Behind them are lives, and behind those lives are the invisible margins of judgment that separate safety from catastrophe. Public attention was brief. 4 men lost at sea rarely make headlines outside their own communities. Yet within Sweden's small coastal towns, the tragedy cut deep. The Antares was part of a generation of small freighters that had long sustained the nation's island trade. Humble, often overlooked, and crewed by men whose names rarely left the harbor walls. The wreck was officially designated a gravesite. Salvage operations were prohibited out of respect for the crew. Over the years, only a few licensed divers were permitted to visit, mostly for documentation and safety inspections. Each described the same eerie atmosphere, total silence except for the gentle movement of the current, and inside, the remnants of an ordinary working day that had never ended. Footage from one of those dives was later shown during a maritime safety conference. It revealed the Antares sitting perfectly upright, her cargo hold filled with sand, and her wheelhouse partly collapsed. The diver's lights caught fragments of machinery, a folded jacket, a rusted radio microphone still attached to its cable. Watching it, even seasoned sailors fell quiet. The Antares became a case study in training programs for small vessel radar operation. In classrooms, instructors used her story as a reminder that even in calm weather, vigilance can fail. Charts and diagrams illustrated how a simple misjudgment, an echo mistaken for a buoy, could cascade into irreversible loss. For the families, however, no report or lesson could fill the silence left behind. In Lysekil's harbor, a simple memorial plaque was placed overlooking the water. It bears the names of the 4 men, followed by one short line: "Lost with the Antares, December 1990. Fishermen and sailors still leave flowers there each winter. 3 decades later, the Antares remains where she sank, resting on the Baltic seabed, slowly being claimed by corrosion and time. Her story endures not through spectacle, but through the quiet respect of those who remember her. Every winter, when the fog rolls in across the Kattegat and the lights of passing ships blur in the mist, sailors still speak her name. Not as a headline, not as a warning, but as a reminder of how fragile the line is between routine and disaster, and how quickly, in the silence of the sea, everything can be lost.